Yeah, we're here with two wonderful guests today, Pete and Shera Heiniger. We're gonna have a discussion about lots of things, but it's gonna be centered on sort of your cancer journey, your podcast, that how you support people, as far as support the people who support the people even going through cancer. We're gonna get into that in just a minute, but thank you so much for being here, guys.
Yeah, our pleasure. We're just I think it's been a long journey, but I'm glad to share it. So I'm excited.
Excellent. I'm glad you're here. And Shera, the wife of Pete.
Yes.
Yeah, we're here to have you fact check him, really. So
Exactly.
chime in as needed. If he gets a little too out there, inflates the story too much, that's your job.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
How's John doing today?
Doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Continuing the journey.
Yeah. Excellent. I can always tell your mood by how well your beard has been trimmed, and so like life is good apparently.
Yeah, life is good. It's
Okay.
formed.
Okay, well, let's jump right into it. Right away, I want to just kind of find out what you've been working on. Of course, it sounds like your journey has been through cancer. You share that it was a 22nd round of chemotherapy.
Yeah, this Wednesday will be round 22. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have some thoughts to share on
Sure.
how to endure and be gritty and
Yeah.
get through tough stuff. I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your podcast and how that came to be.
Okay. Yeah, when we started facing cancer, a lot of times what happens with a lot of us is that we can lose our employment. I mean, either because we're just struggling physically and can't do it anymore, or work seems to make that decision for us, and that's kind of where we landed. And so I think out of that we thought, okay, what is it that I need to focus on, and what can I do? And I think going through cancer for me was something that I realized is that there's so many firsts that people aren't prepared for. And so we really kind of launched a nonprofit called Stages that is going to have a podcast by the same name, Stages, just to come alongside, I think, cancer fighters and also their the spouses, but also just anybody that's friends with them. I think trying to help people understand like how you come alongside somebody and really walk them through the journey. Mm-hmm. But I think we were faced with so many firsts in that first 6 months of you get a stage 4 colorectal, you hear those words and you don't listen to another thing that the doctor says. You're just like, wait, stage 4. I know it's like probably worse than stage 1 through 3, but I mean, what does that mean? And I think you start to go through how long do you have, and you have to come to grips with your mortality. But there's so many little things, and what is chemo? What is infusion? What is that like? And
Tell me about that, because these journeys are thrust on us sometimes.
Yes.
I'm sure you didn't walk in with any preparation thinking, well, this is going to be a huge
that's right.
change in my life completely.
Yeah, I think the very first time we sat down to go over everything, they used the word palliative. And of course, with me, in my past, when I hear somebody say palliative care, I think hospice, this is the end. So the very first thing you get hit with is this word that you're associating with, oh, like this is like, I don't have very long. Mm-hmm. And I think then they explain, well, no, but the average length of time could be 4 years or something like that. So you go into that, and then you're told like every other week you're going to do chemotherapy. And then you kind of have this idea, I guess you're going to put chemicals in my bloodstream and it's going to be brutal or something like that. But it even gets down to the place where you're, what's the hospital like? I mean, what are you going to walk into? So everyone has this idea that you're going to be in this room by yourself, and no, you're on a floor next to 40, 45 other people. Oftentimes there's no barrier between you and the next person. They're in a chair, basically 6 to 8 feet, from you. And there's just a whole row of everyone going through cancer. They're all different ages. Some are older than you. Some are younger than you. You kind of get the first taste of, okay, cancer hits a lot of different people. And then you get this pump that's attached to you after 5 hours of sitting there and having all this other stuff put in your bloodstream. And you have to take it home and then wear it for 48 hours. And you have to go back in and have it removed on Friday. So I go in Wednesday and then I have it removed Friday. So it kind of completely changes your life into, on the chemo weeks, you could be in the hospital in visits and working. I mean, like 6, 7 appointments that week. And so you're just kind of in and out, in and out, in and out. So it does, kind of thrust itself right into your routine, right? So it just breaks everything. And then it's so challenging in the front end because you don't listen. You'd like to think that you listen, but you don't. And so like for me, I have numbness in my hands that's probably permanent damage, and my feet. I can't feel my feet. And that, is called peripheral neuropathy, but it's due to a side effect from a drug. But as they're flying through those drugs, they're like, oh, be sure to tell somebody when you have
It's like that
numbness in your
licensing
hands.
agreement at the end. You're like, scroll.
And
You don't listen to all that.
And because it would go away, like the numbness would come on, but then I'd have my off week and then I'd feel again. So I thought, oh, I'm just going to power through it. My big thing was, I'm going to go longer, more rounds, extend this out. I'm just going to fight through because I'm younger and I'm healthy and I can do this. But what I found out was that somewhere in that pamphlet that they gave you, a folder of like a bunch of information, they're telling you this could actually be permanent damage. And so there's all these firsts that you kind of go through that you don't know. So then when you finally bring it up, all of a sudden the feeling doesn't come back. You're like, oh, I just created permanent nerve damage, and 2 different things that I should have listened better. So I think part of stages is trying to walk people through just that aspect of it. Like, hey, there's some things that you're not going to pay attention to, but you probably should, right? And kind of walking people through that.
you're already very distracted with like the severity of the situation. You're going, who's reading every single word. You're just like, okay, how do I get to the end of this thing now?
Yeah.
And then you're
Exactly,
sitting and you're sitting co-pilot. I mean, what's that like? Because you can't go do the chemo for him. How does that feel being in that circumstance? How did you go through that journey?
It changed everything I literally have things about my life before hearing those words and things, that will never be the same. Sleep, the things I think about, very much every aspect of my life has changed from that.
We've talked about in the past that like when we go through difficulty that how dare us to think that we're doing it alone. The ones that love us are right there. And they don't have any choice. Like you're shackled to this thing, he's going underwater, so are you,
Yes, exactly.
And it's just as difficult. And I think it's worth noting because there are those people who are walking through these journeys, whatever they are. Cancer is a big one for a lot of people, but could be job loss, which expounds things, or going through grief of any kind. The ones that love us are right there with us trying to deal with it.
I did write a blog about the elephant in the room, that very oftentimes you can act like it doesn't exist, but it is very much there. And one of the visuals I use is our number 2 daughter was pretty newborn, and number 1 daughter was sitting beside her. And then she stood up and very slowly just sat on her sister because she was like infringing on her life, And then I have that imagery with the elephant in the room. And for me, it comes at night. We'll talk about heavy stuff. He'll go to sleep. And then the elephant, just comes and sits on my chest and
crushes you.
So right then you have a decision, is this what gets to take over my life, or do I have a choice? And, I'm going to choose to fight this elephant. So I imagine myself as a little kid kicking it off and pushing it off and yelling and telling it who's boss, and it's not the elephant.
That's right.
So
That's right. We just had a podcast about this just recently regarding grief, and we talked about, loss of family dog. Everyone's lost a family pet, and that stinks. On some level, it has those same exact stinging, maybe not as lasting of effect when it's a human being that we've loved for many, many years, but it's still the same kind of feelings. And one of the things we were talking about is how we do face it, because like you're saying, you made a choice to go towards it. I mean, what do you say to those who are very tempted to be like, I just don't want to deal with this. I don't want to look at this. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to let anybody else know about it. This is my fight, and I'm just going to get through it. What do you say to that mentality?
I think the first thing that I say is I felt the same way. in many ways. I'd rather internalize it and not make it everybody else's thing. And I think there is a line. There's always a balance. I think when you're going through things, you don't want to bring your family and your friends and make it all about like now you're part of this too, right? But there's also a part of it where you need those friends and family. So you have to keep it balanced, because you can let cancer, in this case, take over everything. And so then your conversation is that everyone, and that's not how you want your friendships or your relationship, with me and Shera. We can't make it all about that. So I think what we had to do is learn a good communication strategy. But I think when you try to think you can take it all on, my answer to that would be, I'm a pretty big fighter, and I learned I can't take it all on. Like when you're sitting there in chemo and you feel nauseous, and it's been 72 hours, it's been, and it's just been straight. And then you're thinking about like, okay, is this worse than just let it take its course and everything? And so you have to fight those internal battles about, is this worth it? Should I go through it? And or should I just, like, let's just go into hospice and let's just call it, And I think those things battle you, and there's no way that you can overcome that by yourself. You're going to have to develop deep friendships with people who are going to be stubborn with you, who are going to, draw it out of you. And, I think over time, then you start to get a resiliency. I think there is a part where you need a fight, you need grit, you need to approach it that way. But you have to realize that it's a team effort. Like there's going to be people, and I need a team because I can't just bring everything to her. One of the first things you have to worry about is communication with your spouse. I mean, she's working full time, right? And I'm sitting there working on the nonprofit, but she's working full time, 8 hours a day for a software company. And so when she gets out of a heavy day, it's been busy, like the last thing, like, how are you, Pete? And then I'm like, dump like, well, today I felt, so you have to have a balance and try to not draw her in. So if there's things that are really heavy and that you're fighting through, and sometimes it's depression, sometimes it's just that you're scared of what's going to happen. I think it's good to have people, I have some good friends in my life who I can sit down and they're like, you can tell me anything, you can say anything. And that helps me buffer what I say to her. Like I don't keep her in the dark, but there are some times where she's like, how are you? And I'm like, I'm good, and we kind of have a tone that we have between us of communication, which means let's not talk about that right now. I'm okay, but let's just not go there, because it's not the time or the place. We've got to set up a balance, and I don't feel like this is a good time to tell you where I am mentally, because it's just deep.
Yeah, we've and John, I know you exercise this too. Like sometimes we have these unrefined thoughts that like, I gotta go beat this out of me a little bit with a friend, or whether it's a physical thing or whatever. I just need to. I'm not quite ready to speak it out, but I will. I'm committed to doing it, but I gotta first figure it out when it's time to start saying these things. I know, John, sometimes I've come and you're like, yeah, I had a rough day. I've done a few things to kind of be ready, but I need to have the conversation.
Timing's important, right?
Yeah.
A good thing can be a terrible thing if you don't have some foresight into what it's about. And earlier, a few minutes ago, we were talking about everything that happens, good, bad, or indifferent. Every stimulus requires a response. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here. So it's like cancer, stimulus, response, long and complicated. But one of the things is we've been talking, like he referenced one of my dogs was hit by a car, my wife's favorite dog, mine too, on Monday night, and then he came and helped me bury her. But we had to choose, right? Were we going to play the blame game? Were we going to be angry with each other? We're going to be angry with ourselves. We're going to choose to have that, lightning bolt moment be something we deliberately have bring us together. We chose that, and then we worked through the ramifications. Now, what's interesting is I have 4 young children that you saw when they came and rushed your car.
Yes.
And they were all asleep. Well, I didn't go wake them up to tell them,
Right.
I let them sleep. We fed them breakfast. And then once they were fortified, we had the conversation, right? And then began walking through the process. So that's just a small example of how timing with this is important. And then the other thing that just jumped into my mind from what you're talking about, like, hey, sometimes it's not for my bride and I to walk through, it's for me to battle, or me and a friend, right? It's like when you're walking through significant challenge, the goal plan appears to often be outward focused, right? All right, I'm one piece of the resource load in this network. And how can I contribute in that so that it doesn't become all consuming? You know, less tragic, but similar is parenting, right?
Yes.
A lot of marriages struggle because raising children becomes the only thing in the conversation. And that lack of balance, even with a good thing, is just as damaging as something where cancer can't be all consuming.
Right.
You know, that's a pretty wide spectrum. But I love the emphasis that you guys are bringing in of like, and really what I heard of how you lost so many friends and you lost work and all these things from before we jumped on the mics is, yeah, when you go through these things, it's going to bring up other people's demons. It's going to bring up their discomforts, their own mortality, right? And if you don't have the courage to look at it, you may run away or have other issues. But knowing that I'm just one peg in this is a big part of it.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I mean, like, for one, I think we have 5 daughters and they're older, but at the time, because of COVID, we had one girl that came home from college and was student teaching here. And so she was staying with us, so she's back home. And then we had 2 at home already. And so, you know, you have you're experiencing the journey, but they're on it with you whether they like it or not, right? Like, I can't, when they were there when I went through my first round, and I mean, I can't go through 8.5 hours of throwing up and not have them know they're in the same house, right? And it's just brutal. So I mean, when you're going through those things, they're kind of living it with you, right? And then I think we had to say, okay, how do we create some space in there where that's not so heavy? And I think it was good. She took a job in Chicago to teach, and then our next girl, who was 18, said, I'm going to wait to go into school, and maybe I won't go into school, but I'm going to go with her and kind of help her adjust to Chicago. And so they moved in together. But I think that gave them some good space, I think, there. And I think the other side of it is you do have to kind of see there are friends that showed up immediately and said, we're here. And like, so we have a couple in our lives that meets with us every, Sunday night. We just go hang out. There's no agenda. There's no we have to share or talk about cancer or anything. Most of the time we don't. But it's just that their presence became more pronounced in that space. And I think that was so important to us. And then we had friends that we thought would be like that, who just completely, like you said, we know they love us. It's not like, oh, well, now they have they're fighting cancer, so we just don't love them anymore. I know that's not the case. I think it is that kind of unspoken thing. I think the 2 things that I learned going through cancer to me, that having worked with people and try to counsel people through cancer and be there for people before, that now I experience as a cancer fighter, one of the things I learned was just sometimes we've given ourselves such a small toolbox to help people. Like everybody kind of does the whole online Facebook, hey, I'm praying for you. Hope I'm going to pray for complete healing, or I'm going to, and you get that, I have tons of friends from high school all the way through on Facebook. And we started a group called Pete's Posse that a friend of ours started. And so but now we have like 900 people in there. And so there's 900 people that are making comments, but a lot of times it's that, and then they don't know what to say. So once you kind of, as a friend, have gone to your friend going through cancer, and you just say, hey, I'm praying for you. Well, that sounds great the first 2 or 3 times. Then there's nothing else in the toolbox, right? I think one of the biggest things I learned is that for 90% of us, we're not going to get that magical, thing where, hey, there's no evidence of disease. You went through chemo for 6 rounds and it's all gone. Some people get that, but there's a lot of us, I think, that basically are in a long haul. It's going to be a long journey. And so I think people become intimidated by, well, then what do I say? What do I do? Like, this isn't going away. I keep saying I'm praying for him. And I just would say, like, hey, encourage somebody to have your prayer, your focus should be, can I help them have hope no matter what the circumstances of that week is or that day. I think that's the biggest thing that you could do for somebody is in what way could I contribute to them having hope in the midst of circumstances? Sure. Say a prayer for healing, do something like that. But I think on the other side of that is this idea of just like, I need hope to make it through this tough spot, right? And what could you do to contribute to that? So we spent a lot of time writing blogs and focusing on friends who just did these little things, for us and kind of showing people exactly what you could do. I mean, it's amazing. I had a buddy who used to go on a fishing trip in Minnesota all the time. And he just called his buddies from high school and said, "Hey, can I bring a friend?" And they're like, "Sure." So then he said, "Hey, on your off week, we're going to go up to Minnesota and spend 3 days in fishing opener and go up there." I got to get away from cancer and everything. And
They just planned it for you. It's
Yeah.
like, dude, we're going
Exactly.
fishing.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Because you're not planning anything for yourself.
Yeah.
And you're not in that state of mind. They're like,
Yeah.
Hey,
No,
we
no.
got you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was such a blessing just to get away from,
Yeah.
I think, just, I think getting away from everything, talking about it. I don't think I talked about cancer. It all wasn't like I was like, "Hey, I don't know if you guys know." It was like we were just talking fishing. We went back. We were all from Minnesota, so we had a lot to talk about there. But I think that's an easy thing
Yeah.
that someone said, "I'm just going to add one little thing to my summer."
Yeah.
And it changed my life, right? I mean, it really, really did some amazing things for me. So I think that was cool.
What a subtle thing for a friend to do. And it meant the world. in
Oh,
the
yeah.
moment.
Well, I think it's the medicine of normalcy, right? And I think that one of the things I'm hearing is you're giving permission to people to just interact with you normally, right? That's part of the walking through the journey because I think there's this feeling of need to address the problem that scares people away once they run out of the, "Okay, I'm praying for you." Well,
Right.
hey, theorizing and prayer are great, but action's better. Come on.
Yeah.
Show up, please. So it's like when the dog died and I knew I had to dig a gigantic hole, right? Because
Yeah.
she was a large dog. It was very helpful that he didn't just send his thoughts. But
Yeah.
that he
Yeah.
Exactly.
My thoughts and prayers are with you.
yeah, he
Yes.
came and picked up a shovel and dug with
Right,
me,
yeah.
right? So it's like that was a great thing. And there has to be, I think there's a combination because you don't want to just pretend and ignore the elephant in the room, right?
Right.
So it's a willingness to say like, "Hey, I see that elephant. I know it's there. I'm ready to address that elephant if you guys need to or want to. But since we're all on the same page, let's live life together.
Right.
And let's
Right.
try to just have enriching experiences and walk through this. And then we can kind of learn when we need to bear each other up and when we just want to enjoy a good steak and beer
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Makes it-
Exactly.
Two things that I do are I give myself license to deal with it for a little bit of time. Like I'll go running and like the neighbors will be like, "Oh my goodness, what's going on?" Because there will be, angry running and or screaming. That
understand.
goes
I'm
on.
familiar with angry running. Yes. John
And then
is very familiar.
and then also being pickier with the friends that I do trust and let in.
That's critical.
Yep.
You have to have a very carefully filtered inner circle.
Yes.
That's I think something that becomes apparent when you go through more and more difficulty things. I think
Yes.
people who haven't had to pick their friends probably haven't really faced big battles because you can always sort of get soothsayers around you for things that if you want to keep things that are, but if you're trying to strive to overcome something that either can't happen to you or you're trying to challenge yourself, you're going to need new friends. I
Yeah.
mean,
sure.
somebody's not going to make the cut.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Unless they join the journey. Right?
Yes.
Right.
If they
Right.
become someone who fills your bucket, it's reciprocal. It doesn't need to be, I don't need to be the only one who's taking care of that person, and that person doesn't need to be the only one. It needs to go both ways.
Well, it's kind of like if you're on a train or a bus, right? Some people are going to get on, some are going to get off, some are going to say, "Hey, let's just keep going this direction together."
Yep.
But it is that mutual two-way street, and yeah,
So you mentioned the fishing trip. I'm kind of curious because with your podcast, even with stages, what are some of the things that people can say around somebody who's going through a big, difficult, hairy, awful time in their life?
I think, I think moving past a lot of, I think we do a really good job initially when we embrace somebody that's going through something. We show up and like, hey, can I bring some meals over? Can we do that? I think once you get kind of past that first 2, 3, 4 weeks, I think one of the biggest things is just, hey, can we grab some time together? And I think back to when what was life like before you found this out? I mean, did you hang out and talk football? Did you go out? I mean, what did you do? And then can we just do more of that? Because usually,
what's normal?
Yeah,
What should be normal?
The medicine of normalcy.
Yep.
I'm plugging it.
It is so important because I mean, you had people who I would sit there and they're just 5 weeks ago we were sitting there having a laughing conversation about whatever, and just goofing off and not struggling. We're just like, oh crap, we've just been here for 2 hours, and then all of a sudden you get this diagnosis and you sit down with them. And they're just like, so, I mean, how are you? And how are you feeling?
And then supposed to be somber now.
Yeah, and you're just like,
Yeah.
you're like, and that's not, I don't think that's the kind of thing that anybody needs. I think what I'm looking for is, like, if I'm really going through something, the understanding that you're willing to hear me out, right? Like that I need to just unload, but that's not going to be every week or every day. But on the other side, I want normalcy. I want something that feels like it did before, because it helps kind of relieve my mind of this big. I'm sitting at the bottom of a huge mountain that I have to climb, and it looks like it's the the kind of the false peak. You get so far up the mountain now, you're okay. We're 22 rounds of chemo in. And then you're like, but it could be, end up being 44, we could relive this entire year again. And that's a reality. So then how do I get encouragement? And encouragement for me is just like normalcy. It's just like hanging out and doing stuff with my buddies that I used to do, right? And not having to change the conversation or change the way that we work, except, and then I think people come out of the woodwork who are those individuals that you can trust, where you're just like, hey, I just need to go out because I'm scared to death. Like I am just absolutely scared to death this week, or I'm just kind of losing it. I'm kind of getting depressed. I'm getting frustrated, and and somebody who's going to step in and go, all right, let's talk about that, right? And I think the other thing was just I had a buddy who just learned that one of the things the doctor said was like, hey, if you can, continue to do your going to the gym and staying in shape and doing that stuff, that will really help you in this journey. So he just stepped up and said, I'll go to the gym with you every morning and I won't let you out of it. Like I'm going to show up at your house, pick you up, drive you there, and then take you back to your house. So like every morning his big diesel Dodge just sitting there, at 5 in the morning,
waking the neighborhood up.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the
He's
sound of the
revving
gym.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yep.
So I think that's been huge for me, just because then you get that time with each other, but you also know that you're putting in some physical effort that has massive payoff. I think one of the biggest things I face is people have chemotherapy. They're like, oh, you're going to lose your hair. And then I have this big, huge beard. And they're like, you're going to lose the beard. And I'm like,
blasphemy.
Yeah.
So much concern about the beard.
I was
like,
thinking in the back of my mind. That was the elephant. Yeah. That was the elephant for me. Does he know that the beard might go? I don't know.
Yeah.
This is not good.
Yeah. And I think everybody, so what ends up happening is you put a game face on.
Yeah.
You try not to draw people into what you're going through. And then you don't look like you're sick. So then people make all these assumptions that like, hey, let's go hiking or let's go. And you're just kind of like, I'm like barely holding on here. Like I have a smile on my face. Like a lot of times I feel that when I'm around a group of people where I'm just planting a smile on my face. I'm trying to get through it. Like, I'm glad we're here. And so I'm enduring it, but I'm also going through a lot that I'm not communicating and telling you. And I think that's been one of the things that's so hard is ask me, you have to keep people asking. Just like today it didn't work. Like today I don't have it in me to do that. but that doesn't mean the next time you ask that it's going to be a no. It's just this not today. And so I think you have to kind of encourage people. Otherwise, friends will just be like, oh, don't ask him to do that because he can't do that anymore. Or like he's suffering. And you're like, no, it's just like today. Like it's just because that's the thing with this is that it comes at you in waves. You just can't predict from one day to the next how you're going to feel. I wake up and go work out and I feel like I can conquer the earth. And all of a sudden 1 p.m. hits and I'm like, I'm feeling groggy. I've got brain fog. It's one of those things. And then some other day I could feel perfectly fine. So
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think what we're talking about even goes beyond normalcy. You have to give permission to people to say, hey, you don't have to walk through this with me, right? Because like family, you're in the journey. Whether I want you to or not, whether you want to or not, we're stuck. So let's figure this out, right? But friends, they're not that way.
Right.
And it's better just to say, hey, let's accept this up front that if you don't want to walk through what is actually needed here, let's not do the flyby touches, right? Because that is a lot of what you're talking about. What I'm hearing, it's from those who only see you enough that the only thing they can think to do is ask, are you okay, instead of doing the things, right? I had a buddy who started going through some personal relational big issues, right? And it ripped his world in half. And I was like, all right, well, guess we're jumping in. And I wouldn't do that for everyone I know. But I made the choice that, hey, we'll do this journey. And then every single day, kind of like your friend with the truck, I'm there showing up right now, metaphorically, mentally, we reach out and have conversations because we're not geographically located in the same spot. But every day we have touch points. Every day we have conversation about life, right? And it takes the investment of that frequency to be able to know when to say, okay, the elephant's screaming, let's address it, versus, all right, we're just trying to get the chores done.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
for sure.
Well, and I think it empowers you. I think what people don't realize is, when you do that for somebody, when you actually take those steps, what that means for me is it encourages me to power through what I'm going through. But on the other side, like through stages, I had a friend of mine who he worked for me. He's a young kid. He was a manager at Dutch Bros, and he was going through, and all of a sudden he's diagnosed with cancer. He's 21.
Jeez.
He dated one of my daughters, and so I've known him for a while. I have a good relationship with him, and his parents are off in North Carolina, so he's going through here in Colorado, and he's going through this massive thing, and then pretty soon it's spread to your lungs, and you have 2 tumors in your brain. So he's texting me constantly, what's chemo like? What is this going to be like? How do you, asking me all these deep questions, like, how do you just keep going on when it just stinks, and it stinks every day? How do you just keep moving forward, right? And being able, so people encouraging me and giving me strength and encouragement help me be able to step in for him and really kind of, reach in and say, hey, let's set up a routine. Let's talk about what you need. Let's get some people put in your life. I could sit there and encourage his boss to touch base with him more because they had a strong relationship. I could encourage him, hey, bring somebody to infusion with you because they'll let somebody come in.
Yeah.
Even during COVID, they still let you have a guest. So don't go it alone. Like, be there, and have somebody that drives you.
Well, that's the evolution of pain that we don't realize, is that it starts with our own journey.
Yeah.
And then once as you face it, I mean, that's the key. You have to face it. You can't like close your eyes to it, because then you'll be unqualified for that person who says they're going through it. Because what can you say to them?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what you do is you ignore it. Like, that's not going to help them, right? So what do you say? Like, he's texting you. I'm curious.
Well, I think
Yeah.
in the one where he asked me the really hard one,
Yeah.
which is like every day, this is just pack a lunch and do it again. I just went through it yesterday, and now I'm going to go through it again. What do you do? And I said, well, if you want what I do, I said, I have a place in Mount Herman where I bring a camp chair or a hammock, and I'll have Shera bring me out there. I'll be alone, and I just yell. I just because it's a place where it's isolated. There's no trails. There's nobody can. I mean, if they can hear me, it's like an echo. They're not going to know where it's coming from. But I just have those arguments, with myself, with God, with whatever. I just scream out at this circumstance because I just need to get that pressure off of me. And then I encouraged him, then you got to find some people that are going to walk in that you can do that in person. You're not going to scream and yell, but you can grab coffee and just be honest with, like, this stinks. And then the people who are going to stop by your house because you can't even get out, and so they're going to stop in and check in on you. And I think be there for you. But I think those are big steps in that right direction. The other thing that happened was I had a mentor that really, excuse me, I had a mentor that really invested in me for years. I mean, I had met him in 1991, and he was a professor of mine, and then we ended up working together for a company, and he was this guy who I had learned so much from. And so all of a sudden, what was it, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I get a text from him, and he goes, I have pancreatic cancer. I was just diagnosed. And so it's like, and I can't eat, food's not going through, they're going to have to do this surgery, so I haven't eaten in the last 30 days. And so she knows his wife, so she's able to talk with her and stuff like that. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I learned, is that our journeys are so different. The caregiver faces so many different things than what I face. And so I have to always that's why I love Stages and what we're doing, is because I want her to give a voice to what it's like, because it's not a picnic to sit there and have to watch a loved one go through something, but also just the fears that she has, fears that I don't have. I'm worried about what's next, what happens when I die, different things like that. She's thinking, what's next, what happens when he dies. But it's a completely different thing. We still have 5 daughters, and I might be doing this journey by myself. And so what does that look like, and how do we do that? And the job I have right now, is that going to really pay the bills? And so there's so many more things that kind of sit with you, right?
And a couple of things that we do, one thing that we avoid and one thing that I do. One thing I avoid is the platitudes that we were given. The patting you on the back sort of, that's how it feels. Obviously, that's not the energy that they have when they say those things, but those platitudes don't help in the moment. Like right now, we could tell people in the journey, your pain has a purpose, because see how many people we can help because of our pain. But when someone else is right in the middle of the thick of that is not what to say. Like we said earlier, the timing is everything. When something comes up where they're like, oh, I was able to help this person because I had that happen, then that might be a conversation to have. But when they're right in the middle of a diagnosis or something else hard in their life, I don't, when I was in those moments, I didn't want to hear my pain has purpose.
Or you were born for such a time as this.
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah.
okay, I'm breathing. I have a calm face.
I think it's, I know. I think it's funny how people all of a sudden seem to think they need to be counselors.
Right.
And I have a good circle of friends. Not all of them are counselors. They have different roles in my life,
Right.
But all of a sudden they feel like they have to be. It's like,
Right.
I just stink at this, but I'm going to try anyway. And it's really not helpful. Maybe you need to press pause.
Well, here's the other thing too. It's like, just trying to slap a solution makes you feel better, not the person, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, I'm scratching the itch. No, false.
Yeah.
Stop.
Right.
And the other piece to it is,
Yep.
I wish I knew who was the origin of it, but they said when someone's walking through a tough time, don't bring your summer to their winter. Right now,
It is not about you at that moment.
Correct, right? And they don't
Right.
want your summer. You don't
Right.
want to hear the cheery platitude of like pain has a purpose. And here's the idea: like when the bad things strike, you may know on some level that it's possible to create a purpose from the pain, but bad things happen all the time for no reason.
Right.
There is not a bigger why.
Right.
The purpose, if there will ever be one, because it's not guaranteed, comes from going through the journey and choosing to create something based on the response. And so it's very backwards to try and put a chicken back in the egg. And that's what we do there when we try to say, hey, your pain will have a purpose. That's actually not true. It will only be true depending on what value is created from
Right.
the journey. And that takes time.
And like you said, what each person decides they're going to do
Correct.
with that stimulus. Yep.
Because we don't talk about it, but a lot of people who go through tragedy there's no purpose. There's no purpose that gets created because they die. They choose not to fight. They give up, right?
Right.
Or they choose just to become miserable wretches of themselves and not strive for anything of value anymore,
For
and
sure.
just become a shadow. So it's like it's a choice. Every aspect of life is a choice,
Yes.
and
The
you
other-
guys are representing a strong choice. Sorry.
No,
Yep.
you're good. I'm sorry. The other thing that I do is allow that person who's come to me just to feel safe, and like they don't have to like sugarcoat how they're feeling to me. You know, I've had people say, "I'm sorry, I'm just downloading all this on you and just like dropping it all off on you." And I'm like, "Well, I've been there. One, nothing you're saying I haven't first of all experienced, but two, I'm a safe place where you may not have people like this where you can just be like, here's all of it, and I can take it. You know what I mean? When I ask people how they're doing and what their struggles are, I actually want to know, and I'm a safe place for that.
Do you give permission, like quite literally, just in conversation, like, "Hey, please keep sharing with me"?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I say anytime at all. You know, you need to call me in the middle of the night.
Well,
That's
here's a question, right? Because I'm very sensitive to this. I am much more comfortable giving than receiving. So if I start to receive a lot and there's no ability for me to give, I will avoid the relationships where I can't give back. And if it's because I'm in a position I can't give back, so be it. That's life and it sucks and I'll get through it. But if I'm in a position where I should be able to give back, but I'm not being afforded the opportunity because of whatever dynamic has stepped in, that becomes really suffocating for
Yes.
me. And that's what I'm hearing and what you're saying is like, if I can't hear your problems and walk through your life still with you, that kind of normal give and take, then I start to really not enjoy it.
Right. And I wrote a blog about this because I had people who wouldn't talk to me about their lives because they're like, well, my husband doesn't have cancer. I'm like, but you're like in the thick of your
Yeah.
battle. And I want to know because I'm asking. I had to sort of like pry it out of them. And I'm like, this is how I was before cancer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this is still how I'm going to be. So,
Well, in different battles, same war, right?
Yeah.
We're on the same war, fighting different battles. So it doesn't matter the specifics. It matters that we can all support each other in the struggle.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
exactly. Yep.
We had a conversation early on in our podcast with Aunt Deb, and she
The Debonator.
yeah, the Debonator, we called her, and she similar journey, the cancer, just different iteration, but she talked about how the struggle with people even coming to her is because she was the embodiment of death. That's her words, not mine.
Yeah.
She said people saw her as sort of like, you're walking death, and I'm not comfortable being around you, because that deals with their own insecurities or fears and that kind of thing. Is that some of maybe what you've had to deal with friends? Or
And real quick,
Yes.
too, one of the differences, because you highlighted the struggle of looking healthy while going
Right.
through hell. She did not.
Yeah,
She was the
right.
gaunt, hair gone, everything. Look,
But
so-
once the information gets out there and people
Yeah.
know that,
Yeah.
what are they doing with it?
Well, and I think that's what you kind of learn. I think on that Pete's Posse group, you know,
I love that, by the way.
yeah, that's fine.
That's
was-
awesome.
It was really cool. I think if you wanted to
Yeah.
do something for a friend, creating a group where,
Yeah.
because I have people that I went to high school and college with from all over the place that support me. But I think that's what you kind of learn, because in there I made a promise to them early on. I'm not just going to say cheery things here. I'm going to be honest with you. So there's times where I've posted a video or an update and I kind of get choked up in the midst of it because it's been a week or a day, and I try not to make every post that way, but I think that's where you start to get an idea of the people who can kind of deal with that and encourage you, and then some of the people who just kind of fall off, right? And I think you can see that even in the group, that there's just, it's really hard to get people to feel strong and wanting to encourage you when they have to kind of face again their own mortality while looking at you, realizing, oh my goodness, he's going through this and I don't know how I would go through it, right? And I don't even want to think about that. I don't even, and sometimes I think we don't always know everybody's journey either. They could have lost a loved one or a parent or something to cancer that you're unaware of. And so this just reminds them, and it pulls all of that in. I know I had a good friend who kind of fell off, whose Dad had died a year before my diagnosis. And they were so tight, they were really, really close. And so I think to a certain degree, I can at least understand that talking to me and listening to me and watching that can kind of pull all of those sore spots up. And he hasn't had much time to heal and mourn that loss. And so I can completely understand it and get it too. So
right. Yeah. It is important that eventually that we do get to the point where, I wouldn't say comfort's probably the wrong word, but strong enough to face it again. That's part of the journey. It's like, if it's not today, it's going to happen eventually. I mean, death and loss is part of life. It's more frequent as we get older, but it's something, if we train ourselves when we go through it, we'll be ready, at least a little bit more so. Next time it comes around, right?
Yeah. And I think sometimes we just have to be so mindful and careful with what we say. We had close friends who had a son, a young boy who was suffering with cancer. And as I kind of unpacked, as he's walking this journey with me, his name's Billy. Billy and I go back and forth. And I just asked him, I said, when, the second year, when everybody's walking in and saying, hey, praying for your son, praying for healing, doing that. I said, what did that do to you? And he goes, well, it just taught me that there was one entity in the entire earth who could deal with this, and he wasn't. And so it made me angry at him. And so, which is the exact opposite, I'm sure, of what his friends and his community wanted him to think. But it was what the emphasis was. Well, the only thing we have in our toolbox is to pray for this healing. And so it's not coming in. And now it's not him, it's his son. So like, he's even more emotional.
Sure.
And hates. He'd rather it be him going through that than his son. So that really opened my eyes too, I think, because I could feel that to a certain degree. But then he was admitting to me that as he started seeing things on Facebook and comments that people were making, he was reliving those moments as people said the same comments to me as they said to him. And he would like text me, I'm so mad, and I was like, it's okay. It's like, because you and I get it, right? Like we can walk through this and we can discuss this, and maybe there will be some healing for you in this, because we now both can go through it a second time and kind of process it, and you have somebody that understands and can process it with you, which you didn't have before.
Rather than combating the anger, it's almost like, I am so I can't even think straight, and I don't understand why this happened, and you're just like, yeah, I know, I hear you, man.
Yeah, I mean,
you're not like pushing back and like, it's okay, you'll be fine, you should get back to happy. Like, hold on.
Yeah.
This is real.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're a person of faith or not, I think whoever you shout out to in the middle of the day or night, I think there's this idea of, what do you want, from me? And I think you get to that point when you are on any journey, whether it's, a work journey, something that you have to dig in and be gritty about. And I think in the midst of that tough battle, you're really kind of faced with this challenge that, like, there's gotta be something that is wrong with me, or there's something that, why is this continuing to happen? I know, like, one time I'm in infusion, I'm going in, I'm supposed to get the pump off. It's supposed to be a good day. No more chemicals going through my body, and now I can recover for a week. And they're like, oh, you have an irregularity in your heartbeat, so we're going to have to kick you over to emergency. So I have to call her at work and go, hey, I'm going to need you to get a ride over here, because you're going to have to drive me home, because they're definitely not going to let me drive. And so we go through all that, 6 hours of sitting in there watching and everything. So it's like middle of the night. We walk out, and our car's battery is dead. And we can't even get in it.
Really?
We're just like,
who
do we know? Who do we know that we can A, wake up, and B, lives fairly close to the hospital that we're, and you're just like, but that's when you kind of get in that moment of, what do you want? Like, what is it that you're trying to get from me? Because just tell me what I need to like do, and I'll do it, so that we can check that off the list, and I don't have to keep doing it, but that's not how it works. But I mean, it really does get to those points where you're just like, what's next? When you're just waiting for the next boot to drop, right? And I think that's hard.
What makes it even harder is that we look for patterns, right? I think we really look for patterns. It's like, okay, dawn's coming, but that's not always the case with circumstances. Like dawn may not be coming. For some reason, the analogy that jumped in my head is I don't get angry at fire for burning, right? If I see a flame burning something, even if it's something precious to me, I don't get angry at the fire. I understand that it's doing what it does, and that's kind of life. It's like, what is required of me? Everything. Until I die. Everything's required of me if I want to live here and turn something. So no matter how bad it is, life is kind of like this fire that will burn everything it can, and there's no reprieve in sight until it comes. And it's not because any choice has been made. It's just because the same roll of the dice circumstantially is now back in your favor or back to your reprieve, where it was just torturing you. And I don't know, for myself, walking through some of the things that I've done, I've found more relief in that, knowing that it's not some dictated thing, but it's just like, okay, there's no guarantee that I just stepped on this. That really sucked. The last 4 days have really sucked. Maybe, tomorrow will be better. Like knowing, Matt, that's not guaranteed. Tomorrow could be worse than today. Let's do whatever can, or hit it broken, or hide, or whatever may be needed, and whatever state of despair there might be, has been a relief to me, because it's almost like choosing the opposite creates a greater letdown if the reprieve doesn't come,
right?
Opposed to just, all right, time to just get through the storm, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then sometimes, we've talked about friends who've fallen off and, given us the platitudes, but our journey is sort of just extending them, sort of seeing where they are in their life and sort of just extending them grace that, it's fine that they're not in that spot where they can do that, taking care of us, but also they're trying their best.
Mm-hmm. And there's a side of it, though, that I want to be honest with the listeners. I was mad. Like, I got pissed. I was really pissed when the people that I invested in, that I mentored, that I took interest in them and helped them and poured life into them for sometimes for a matter of years. And then it's all of a sudden this happens. And I didn't even expect them to come along on the journey with cancer. That was not an expectation I had for anybody. It was kind of like, if you want to, that will be awesome.
Yeah.
But there was no like, hey, I'm just going to draw if you're a friend of mine, I'm going to draw you into this big cancer thing. It was just, I want the same relationship with you that I had before. I mean, why did it need to change? What about my diagnosis changed that? And so when it did change it, to be honest with you, as much as I wanted to give them grace, I think that came later. I was like so mad, and there's sometimes where even right now I'm struggling with a few people. Like, do I just communicate to them? Do I like, hey, let's grab coffee, and be like, hey, why'd you fall off the face? Or is that too in their face? So I don't even have an answer for that. Like
I love that so much, because and there's such an important distinction. And it's kind of the third route we didn't talk about earlier. So yes, tragedy strikes. You can jump on and fight with me. That would be awesome, right? Like you just said, like, thank you. I will take it. But also that's not an expectation. So why can't things just continue as normal? It's like panic and flee or jump into the fight, or like the binary code everyone sees. It's like, I either have to jump in or I'm like out. And you're like, no. Like, can we just stay the course as it was? And I'm of the mind, my bent would be absolutely to sit down and be like, why have you fallen off the face of the earth? Is it because you don't know what to do? Because I can help you with that, but I just miss my friend. I don't need anything extra. And maybe it's like you're already not talking to them. So if it insults them or offends them, well, you're not in a worse spot. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you may get your friend back too, who's just, like you said, didn't know how to handle, did the best they could, think that they're helping, maybe maybe not. And that can just be revealed. I just think that there's no shadow I've put light over that I've not regretted putting it over, even if it's ugly and it hurts. I'd rather know and see it, because it's the ambiguous and unknown that really terrify me and keep me up at night.
Yep.
But once I face them and put them in the light, it's, even if it's able to eat me, it's not as bad as my imagination made it. And earlier we were talking about potency is lost over repetition. And I think that even ties into relationships of like, I will assume the worst of someone I love if I haven't had the conversation to figure out what's actually going on.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But then it's like the more of those conversations that happen, the less of a monumental task they appear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's that potency piece.
We build it up bigger than it really is, and I think what the like you're saying, like I just need you to be normal around me, and I think I have to be a master counselor in order to engage. So I'm just not going to engage at all.
Right. Exactly.
It's like no, like that's not what you were before. Nor if you were, is that necessarily what I need right now?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
just
Right.
hold a pole next to me, dude.
Well, it's like a re-education thing, right?
Yeah.
It's educating the people who walk through it and the people
Right.
who are going through it,
Yeah.
right? So like whether it's the friend or the person with the problem, it's like both need educated. Like you said, hey, you're not going to listen to these things up front, but listen to them because you may cause yourself permanent nerve damage.
Right.
Like learn what to pay attention to. It's different. Like that. And that's what I understand stages to be. It's a total education program for both those who are going through the conflict and both those who are around it to have a healthier response that's actually beneficial.
Yes, exactly.
What's fun is you can send this episode to the friends you want to have coffee with
Yeah.
and say, hey, like, I want to have coffee with you. Listen to this so you're a little bit warned because I'm bringing this to the
Yeah.
conversation.
Exactly.
Just here's the baggage. I'm
Yeah.
Yeah, here's my question. This will prepare you. Think about it. Be ready.
Yeah.
I'll put you in the corner booth so you can't get out of the conversation. And then we'll go on with our lives. It'll be good.
I see this in not just cancer, but people who've gone through divorce or some other kind of loss. It's amazing when people just check out. It's like assuming that person like they don't have enough to give to them, and it's like to John's point, it's like everyone just needs a friend, no matter what you're going through. Like just be a friend.
Right.
Don't get weird about it. Like be the person you always have been.
Yeah.
Use tact. I tell John, I said, my go-to, and I have to resist it whenever there's something off, is I want to be humorous, which is my superpower at the correct time. Maybe not right after the news, but eventually we're going to have some fun with this. But being yourself, because you're sensing that. You say platitudes like, you're being fake with me right now. Like, I don't need fake.
Right.
Like, I actually need real, authentic right now so I can walk through this correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, when you have you can distance yourself and have those healthy moments. I think what you also come to grips with is the fact of, like, maybe just in general, whether you have cancer or not, how often do you actually just tell somebody how much you value their friendship, right? Because that's really what you're trying to say to them, right? Is that when you fell off, it destroyed me, which means I really valued what we had. But maybe in my healthy moments, when I think about this, part of that is because I never really said that. I just assumed because we were getting together and having a great time that it was just assumed, like that you knew that this was, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe you don't know how much you mean, because I think we all kind of discount how much we mean to other people sometimes. Like, it's not that, he probably has tons of friends, or whatnot. And
He has Pete's posse or
yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
Yeah.
And look at all these people, and so he doesn't need us. And I think that's something that for me I had to come to grips with, is like, well, Pete, I mean, how often did you actually tell them how much you did value what you had with them?
And do they even know you're
Ooh, that's
hurting from
good.
the loss, right?
Yeah.
What I love about what you're talking about is you're doing that mirror gazing, right? You're looking in yourself, the introspective journey, which is typically painful because you can't blame things. When you're like, what can I own in this? That's even more aggravating because you're like, dang it, you're like, what if you talk to every person you feel this loss with, and most of them think they've been doing what you want, right? So it's been on you this whole time. Right. It's also on them because they could ask, but that's less helpful with the mindset of I'm going to own it. Right.
Right. Exactly.
So it's like, well, if I own it and I ask and I find out that my friend's been here the whole time, mourning, also not knowing what to do, and they thought they were helping me, it's like, well, we just resolved that. Let's jump back in. Right.
You're doing. I see in you that you've only gotten stronger through this journey. You have gotten stronger through this, and I say that here's the evidence of it, because it is a monumental task to be able to face the fact that I have cancer and say those words. I have cancer and I'm fighting cancer, right? But now you're going several levels higher and you're going, hey, I wonder how I should talk to my friends through this that are seeing that I have cancer. It's the opposite of victim mindset. Like you could say they should. I'm the one dealing with this. But because you've been lifting this heavy weight, in many ways, you're almost stronger than the people around you in this particular area. It's like, this is what happens when you do this in a healthy way. You start even getting more. So like, okay, I'm lifting that weight. I'm like, not that it's easy, but then I can also look to other things. I'm like, I wonder if I could really challenge my relationships right now. I wonder if I could challenge this. And it's a perpetual thing because this is similar muscles.
Yeah, real quick, I think what you're hitting on,
Yeah.
the strength that's visible, is it's the trained response versus the natural response.
Yeah.
Right? You guys are conditioned for chaos now.
You are.
So
You're
with
in
the
the gym.
strength that you've built, right? Because the natural
Yeah.
responses you've talked to are fair. But with the conditioned responses over time, now you have a strength that's giving you the ability to sit here and think, maybe I need to sit down with these guys and see where they're at, right?
Yeah.
Like that's evolved.
Yeah.
I remember too, early on in our marriage and ministry, our working, we had a guy who he was a big guy like Pete, and he had a lot of little kids always running around and jumping on his lap, and he'd kiss them on the cheek and then they'd run off. And one time this guy and he hugged goodbye, and the guy just out of response, because of doing that so often with his kids, the guy kissed him on the cheek, and Pete was like, "Oh my goodness, that was
What just happened?"
he was like, "Oh, that was so awkward." But that is something, that I do see him do a lot now. That's fun to watch. Just how
You're a cheek
one of
kisser now?
those.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Well, and walk across the parking lot and give a big hug and say it, and then when you leave people, you always say, "I love you," to guys, which is one of those things that
There's
you.
that growth. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you have. I love what you said about the don't take for granted piece, right? It is fun because we've had a number of conversations the last 7 days that have had some themes, right? And I was talking with a buddy. He hasn't seen his family for a while. This buddy hasn't seen his family for a while, and they're having this reunion around a happy event and stuff. And there's been some strife because it's a stressful happy event, and he's been reflecting on what the heck's going on, and he realized that when you take for granted expectations on a relationship, like, oh, because we're family, we'll always be here. It's like, oh, because we're brothers, we'll always have a relationship. That is actually not true.
Right.
And he's like, the realization, the fruit of it was, I need to be more intentional. I need to invest more energy and show more respect, and I need to pursue the unity I want in the family as if it could be lost in an instant, because it can be.
Very true.
And that's kind of what I just see the direct correlation to what you're saying here. It's like, do they actually know, family, friend, or whoever, the value that they hold in my life?
That's good.
Because it's up to me to speak that, right?
Right.
I even have a coworker who got emotional because he failed to express that to his father, and his father passed. And it's like, got to express it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you just never know how the perspective of that person and how they're translating the things that you guys are going through, life in general, different things that happen between you and your families, and just their life, separate from yours, because they're processing it through a lens that you don't possess. And I think I learned that the most through my brother, Paul. He moved to Germany when I was in junior high. And so he's lived there ever since. Right. And so he's now lived in Germany longer than he ever lived in the United States. Right. He has a broken English. When I talk to him,
He has really
like,
good
he has to try
German
to remember. Yeah.
accent.
Excellent German. But I'm just like, he sounds like he can't speak English. And so I give him a lot of grief. But I think in that relationship, because you only touch points ever so often, I forget what lens he looks at our relationship through. Like for me, that's my big brother. I have all these fond memories of when I was a kid and looking up, and he was the strong guy. He was 14 years older than I am. So I got to see him kind of at his peak in high school and all this stuff, and then go into the Army and do all these things. And so when I watch that, I have this image of him, but I never said those things to him. I never went like, you're my hero, or anything like that. Well, he just sees these other touch points, and so I think he's discounts how much he means to me, right? And I think again, it's because of the lens. I don't have to be present with my brother to have this hero image of him just recalled up in my mind, right? But for him, I was just this little 5-year-old punk, like he didn't get to experience the rest of those years with me because he was in Germany. And so we weren't tight, and there wasn't email back then. So it wasn't like we kept in touch or Zoom called each other or something like that. So I think that taught me an important thing with him, because I think there's been times where he just goes, I know we haven't always gotten along. And I was like, what is he talking about? Like, I've always gotten along with him. And then I was realizing that there have been a few times through the years where we've disagreed on something, right? But that through his lens, we've never always gotten along. And I'm like, those are just 2 5-minute conversations, for me. And I think those are the things that we don't realize, is that, not only are we living different worlds and different journeys, even though we're friends, but they're seeing things through a completely different lens. So I could look at the same experience that they're going through and just kind of like, like that's not a big deal. And to them, it was like a huge deal, or something that you said was a big deal to them, either in a good way or a bad way. And you just didn't take it that way.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I want to bounce an idea, and it's a poorly formed one, so I'm sorry if it doesn't come out well. but I want a litmus test, if you guys don't mind. So I've been walking through chaotic event after chaotic event and tragedy with one of my friends for a couple of years now. It's just been rough. Trust me, the cycle's just not letting up. It's like, this gets handled, now it's this. And he's a warrior. So it's not like he's bringing this on to himself through inaction or anything. It's just, it sucks. And there's been times where I also just battling alongside him, right? I'm not in the circumstances. I'm just continuously going through it to the best of my ability with him, get fatigued. And what I'm realizing I've not done well is I'll just try and go and recharge and then come back right in, right? So there's not an absence, but I'm trying to handle my fatigue without him knowing, right?
Yes.
Because it's fatigue from his problems that I'm trying to help with. And what I've realized with what we're talking about is, man, I think it'd be so much beneficial, instead of the moments where I get frustrated with him, just being like, hey, dude, like, I'm just fatigued fighting the fight with you right now. And I'm ticked off about these things. And I'm not ticked off at you, but like, I'm also infuriated by this. And I'm hitting a fatigue point fighting alongside you. So I just want to be clear. Yeah, I'm ticked. I'm pissed, but it's not at you. It's at these freaking situations that we can't get a hold of. And and the thought is, I feel like that'd be more beneficial for him to be like, oh, that's why he's mad. He's mad because he's fatigued also, and he thinks this is BS, right?
Yeah.
Shera,
is that good?
Yeah. Would you
Yes, I think there's a level of health in that not many people do. We were just, for one of our podcasts, we were talking about how I say something and he hears it differently than what I mean. And it was along that line of my doing self-care, taking care of myself, just having a moment away from the situation. And he interpreted that as my not wanting to be in the fight with him. And I'm like, I just need a break.
Right.
Can I just go paint with a friend and we not talk about cancer today?
Yeah. Even nurses have to hit the pillow every now and then.
Yeah.
Right.
Or,
so
hey,
you gotta be careful with that.
Yeah.
Can I go to the mountains with you and scream with you? Because I need to scream too.
Yes.
Yes.
So I have some cleanup to do. But I'm glad to have the visibility, right? I'm really grateful.
And I think to answer your question, I think honesty and having that is actually, because it helps us. I mean, because it shows that you're in the fight. Like, if you weren't fatigued, I mean, how invested are you? I mean, like,
oh, that's
if,
good.
If there's been this cycle and you're just like, oh, come on, we just power through it. And you didn't really ever get as exhausted and emotionally affected with it, then how much is there? And it also gives, it would give me strength to know, like, yeah, this is crap. This is difficult. This is even fatiguing my friend. And I think that helps me do a few things. It helps me balance, again, like the importance of balance, of saying like, hey, I know, like, I had a friend who signed up to say like, hey, you can talk to me about anything, anytime, anywhere. But that also means like I have to also be trusted with the idea of like, yeah, but there's still the right times to do that, and there's a pace to do that in which I can actually be a friend to them in the midst of them being a friend to me. Like I don't have to have that conversation today with that person. And that's why I think I try to get people to get more people into the fight.
Spread it out some.
So that you can like tag team a bit. That's a good point. Or, it's just like, because someday some guy's going to have it, and another day another guy's going to have the energy.
That's a great
And it's just like, maybe I'm having that conversation, I'm feeling fatigued. I was wondering if we pull a few more people into these deeper discussions and things like that, it'll be better for all of us.
Well, there's two aspects to that relationship where, like, I would say I'm just going to have an art night with a friend. He, in the past, would just say, oh, okay, bye, and then just stew and think about how I didn't want to be in the fight with him. And then because of this happening, he's communicated more and said, okay, so this is how I feel right now. You saying that could be totally not an issue, not with all this baggage, but at the same time, that's how I'm taking it. Well, so then, you would communicate. So you don't want to hang out with me tonight, and I'm like, I just need a break, Right. And then it was this big old issue that because we dealt with it, it wasn't. Right. As big of an issue. And good. Then, the honesty and just communicating. And sometimes he said, this is how I feel. And I'm like, well, that's not what I meant. And I'm like, and then you were like, well, that's how I took it. Right. So we can't discount how I took it just because that's not what you meant either. So it's all talking, communication, being honest.
And I think too, sometimes there's got to be that healthy conversation, because when it wasn't so much that I thought, oh, she doesn't want to be with me. It was, oh, my issues, this cancer is too much for her. She needs an escape. So you kind of you're like, oh, and so you have to fight because you want to like, oh, well, I'll internalize all that stuff. So I think when we talked it out, it was good. No, I'm in the fight. I'm there. I'm here. I'm just exhausted, right? And I think that's the difference. I'm still in it with you, but we've got to pull more people into this. Like, I need you to lean on some friends. I need you to do that. Why don't you actually go out and hang out with someone tonight too? You don't have to sit by yourself, and stuff like that. And so I think that's been really helpful. And I think there are moments for that kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say brutal honesty, but just real honesty in, like, she's pushing back on me and going, hey, well, I mean, it's your choice tonight to be by yourself, because you could actually call a bunch of buddies and go do something too, right? And use that as an escape yourself. But we probably both are exhausted. Why don't we both get a breather, right? Yeah. And I think that's the reality. But if we never had that conversation, I'd just kind of internalize it. And
what I love about it is both are true, right? Your perception is as true as it's not what you wanted it to be perceived. Right. You're like, I just need a break. I'm not going anywhere. I just need a break. And you're like, I'm alone now, right? That's the emotional response. Like, I'm being abandoned. She doesn't want to be a part of it anymore. It's like, it's fair to feel that way, but it's also not true.
Right.
And it's fair for that not to be what you want the perception to be, and you just need a break. Both are true.
Right.
And it's kind of working to, okay, well, the emotion's still mixing this up, but both are true, and we can take that in trust because of our relational capital. That, okay, that's not your intent. You just need a recharge. I'm going to accept that and allow my emotions to run their course and not let them push me into despair, right? And it's interesting because this ties into some things that I'll even talk with Lindsay about, right? Because I'm noticing in our conversation oh my gosh, there's this perception of what I'm saying where it's like, I'm just needing recharge because I'm fatigued here. And I can tell that right now in the conversation, oh, this is being perceived as I want out and don't want to be a part of this anymore, be part of this journey these specific things anymore. It's like, oh, that's not true. So like, I'm just loving the conversation because it's like, no, me being frustrated with I'll just be more specific instead of ambiguous. Me being frustrated by having 4 young kids doesn't mean that I'm going to get in the truck and drive away and not come back. Right?
Right.
Me saying, hey, I just need to recharge for a little bit is just literally, I just need to recharge for a little bit. It's not, you're going to not have me come home.
Right. Exactly.
And just seeing that right now, I'm like, oh my goodness, no wonder there's like this thought here, especially from back when I was in the military, that I just up and disappear. That's the fear of just like, no, I'm just fatigued. And there's, I don't know, the reason I guess I'm beating on it is because I think that there's a big deal there that I just benefited from, and I'm assuming others can benefit from facing too, of like, yeah, remember that what is perceived may not be anything in the realm of what you could imagine, which is.
I love how you're investigative too. You're just at, that's really key. It's like, where are we at? I mean, it's not unlike when you say your friends need to know what to say, when to say it. I mean, a lot of that just comes around questions like, are you having a good day, a bad day? Bad day? All right. Hey, do you want to go fishing? Like you said, good day, tell me about it. How what made it a good day? Did something cool happen today? Like celebrate something that happened, like having that timbre. And a lot of what we're talking about here too is true of marriage anyway. When you guys have conversations, much less add this gigantic weight to the conversation. There's a lot of that where we just have to be like, no one person is built to be your savior,
Right.
So,
and there have been conversations that he's had with me, and I've said, I've done all that I could, but at the same time, I've said, you need to talk to that guy, and sort of use the support system we have to be of more benefit for him, because that guy's gone through more of what he has than I have. You know what I mean? So,
and sometimes you can ask on behalf of that person. I think I've talked to some of her friends and said she's having a week, and the words, even if they were the right words coming from me, won't matter.
And I've texted friends and been like, please,
I love that.
Just
text
reach
me
out.
right now.
Yeah.
I love it because it's not just timing, it's delivery, right? And like, I can give you something, I can tell it to you, right? I can touch your shoulder, but you need it from Tasha, right?
Yeah.
Or like it's not the right delivery.
And we have adults in each of our teenager girls' lives that we're like, could you go say the same thing to them that their parents are saying?
Totally.
And,
I'll try to comfort one of my kids, and I'll walk up to Lindsay and be like, I need you to go down. She's like, well, did you try this? I was like, it's not what I'm doing. It's that I'm not you. Right?
Exactly.
It's that I'm not you. They need you. That's a good additional point.
And the other thing I think too is just like we talked about working out. And I think one of the aspects of working out, is when you're in the gym or you're running or anything like that, you get those moments where you're going to be like, I'm going to try to push for 5 extra reps. I'm going to go to failure. I'm going to go and dig in. And I think that's part of the relationship thing too, is trying to encourage each other. Like, hey, I know we've been having kind of a revisit to some dark moments or to some thoughts, but can we push through and try to build that space a little bit more, so that like maybe I can hold my tongue for 2 more days? You know what I mean? Like, do we have to discuss this thing, or can we just push through it and talk and keep positive? And I think that's been a big thing between us, is just like being able to say like, hey, I'm just going to grit it out. And then usually what I find is I grit it out and I only needed to do it for another day. And then I kind of get a release from it. So it didn't have to be a 2-hour long dark session it was just like, if I could just power through that moment, that evening, tomorrow and some circumstances that happened kind of erased it and eroded it, and it's not as a heavy.
It's important to communicate that too, because if you're using the gym analogy and you don't tell your spotter you're going to do another 5, and he kind of quits on you in the last 5, it's going to be a problem. So you're going to get hurt. But if you're just saying, hey, look, it has a beginning and an end. Here's the timeline, but I do need to push a little further here and talk to that.
As we keep talking, if you just pull the mic a little bit closer, you can pull it in so you don't have to lean forward to make you comfortable. But it is interesting too, because going back, so I'm kind of like seeing nuggets pop out at us, right? So we have the one of Okay, I'm not going to lose it. So you have who's delivering it matters, right? Timing, it came back. Whew. It came back. So you have timing, right, is super critical for dealing with this stuff. You have who's the delivery is super critical. And then the third one is kind of like the self-assessment of not it. It kind of goes into timing, but is it necessary, right? Which is why I just heard you say is like, because it's so easy when the pain flares up to want to rehash it for a release, but really it's just putting vinegar on the wound, right? When in reality, it's just like, let's just get through it. And if it's still here, like you said, tomorrow, then I'll address it. But otherwise, maybe it's just an emotion that needs to pass. Like a real tongue-in-cheek, super small example would be when you wake up at 4 a.m. and you want to go back to sleep, but if you get up at 4 or 5, the emotion's passed, right? That's like a micro example. But what do you think?
Well, I think it's exactly. I mean, I think all of those things have to be brought in, but especially as you start to work through it, I think the important thing through all of this is endurance. Can I get some more endurance? I mean, like when we're trying to help a buddy through something, my ultimate goal is like, can I help, push through so that not only is this problem we can put in our rearview mirror, but as the next one comes, because when you're talking about periods of chaos and things are just cycling, that can last for a long time. How do we pull endurance through it? So like, can I be there to kind of push you through and help you? So I think, that comes through all of those things. I think it's like making sure the right person's delivering the message, making sure it's the right timing, making sure the message is actually right, that you're checking yourself there. But I think then, moving into, do we need to do it right now? Do we need to do it at all? Do we need it like, I know it feels good because sometimes we enjoy wallowing in something together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you just kind of,
sucks.
yeah, and you go, and sometimes that can feel good, but I think most of us have kind of at the end of that conversation don't feel that anything is changed much, like it might have been great to feel like you redirected all this energy and emotion towards someone else or to another circumstance or a group of people. But at the end of the day, tomorrow it's going to be the same problem, and you didn't actually add any benefit to it, right?
You didn't move it forward.
Yeah. So if you can, at the end of the day, if the bare minimum that you could do is just say, I went one more day without having a, for lack of a better term, a bitch session. I think, with someone, I think that's really, actually a big deal. I think because maybe then it's 2 days, then maybe it's a week, and maybe it's, I don't know if I need to wallow in anything, right? Like maybe I can develop a resiliency where I'm not stuffing it. I'm honest with everything, but it's just not bothering me as much because I'm just taking it in stride. Yeah.
What do you think about this? Because we're talking about some like doctorate level art stuff here, art versus science. This isn't a science because like on the one hand, it's like you have to share. On the other hand, now I'm sucking it up to not share to build resilience, right? And if you look at this in a binary black and white code, you're going to miss everything. So what we're talking about here is the art of going through hard things. And it's funny, we've been talking about stewarding pain, right? There's a lot of resources out there for marriage and money and building your career and stuff, but there's not a lot on stewarding pain to a more positive outcome, right? And that's what we think the grit theory in part is, these conversations. I think this is a confirmation of that, right?
Oh yeah, it's in pain is as long, if not longer, than many of those other areas of focus. Finance sometimes could be set on autopilot. Pain sometimes is like in your face. You got to deal with some second by second.
Yeah.
It's a lot bigger thing, and that's what we're talking. The stewardship, you have to know how to deal with that. That's very much what you're dealing with. It's a weight like anything else.
The question I had, as you go through, now you're in the cycle of like, okay, because it seems like a journey. So the journey now is, can I build the resilience to go another day without the bitch session? Can I go another day without this venting of this visceral problem, just for the release of it, right? So I think there is an evolution here. There's a progression, right? Where it's like now you're coming back to, well, should I have these conversations with friends? Or, it's really great to have this resource, but do I really want to use that resource right now and share this emotion right now? Or can I go the day? So I think now what's being questioned is as this becomes more part of my existence, am I going to allow pain to be my identity? Right? Am I going to allow cancer to become my identity? Am I going to allow this thing? Because you've been very both of you have been very straightforward about cancer is not going to be all our life's about.
Right.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
So it's kind of like with the resilience. Can I wait another day and have a normal conversation and not allow the pain and frustration here to dictate my identity with my friend? Right. Is kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an interesting thought. What do you think?
I like it because I think our big thing has always been, like you said, not to make cancer the big thing. Hope is the big thing for us. Like, how do I pull hope into any moment, any circumstance, regardless of whether it's good or bad? And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, because there is so much more hope in developing a resiliency that, like, you know, because I think some of us who are in the midst of pain are just like, if I could go 5 days, if I could go 3 days, if I could go an hour, I mean, it all depends on where you are in that journey. But if I could just go where I just powered through and I could just change my mindset, and I had people along the journey with me that are helping me do that, so I'm staying focused. I think that's such a big light at the end of the tunnel, because you're like, okay, I can turn, it's just like working out, right? I can turn those 5 extra reps into 10 extra pounds, and I can, you know, and I can start moving and developing, getting stronger. And it's the same thing. It's like, I can turn that 2 days of not having to wallow in it into 3 days, and I can turn it into 4 days. And if I can start seeing brightness in my life there, where I can control that, and I'm really taking control of that inner thought process. And the beauty of it is I have all these friends, you know, I have close ones who are helping me stay focused on that. And that's what we've been trying to do, is try to get everybody to remain focused on, you know, hope. You know, like with Stages, our blog post and our podcast basically are telling the victory stories of people who stepped in our lives and done good things for us. And the reason why is because we could have focused in on the people who fell away, but they probably just need to read a blog post or hear a podcast about the little thing that somebody did. Like, well, I could have showed up and worked out with them every day, you know, or like, wow, you know, I was thinking about that anyway. And so I think focusing on the hope and the life-giving things is so much more, because those are the things that empower us to go a little bit longer, a little bit farther. And then think of the impact. To me, like that, you know, I know it sounds cliche, but the ripple effect is now I can and Shera can help someone else. You know, I talked about my mentor. Well, because she's talking to his wife, and I've known him for so long, you know, his wife is like, he's really grumpy. Like he's doing all this, and I'm just laughing because I remember all the times we've worked together, and I'm like, oh, I know that side of my, you know, so then I'm like, all right, I'll text him in a couple days, and, you know, so that there's no timing, like, oh, Shera just happened to talk to Drina, and then all of a sudden it's all of a sudden I got a text from but for me, it's like, I need to be there for him, and like, because I was the grumpy guy, right? I was the guy who was like, don't you understand? Like, I'm just going through a terrible time, you know, like, and, you know, and you're just kind of don't want to be around anybody, but you do, you know. And so I think I totally get where he's at, but at the same time, he's going to hear that better from me. Like, you know, because I can text him and go, yeah, I mean, that's just part of it. I mean, you're in your first round of chemo. I mean, like, that's the deal. I mean, like, just, you know, understand, like, that's going to be the deal for the next couple rounds. So, but it's going to get better. But you know, like, just like, this is what you have to get through. So just, and he can hear that better from me. If he heard that from his wife, he'd probably like, oh,
you're not going through this. You
don't
know.
You don't know. You've never been through
But
this.
Pete, you're talking about growing hope, like it's a muscle.
Yeah,
because you're saying, hey, you can, like, this guy, he's coming into, let's say, the gym for the first time. He's like, will I ever be able to lift this bar even?
Yeah.
It's like, I know it's hard at first. Just do it. I'm here with you. I'm going to help you. Actually, I'm going to spot you a little bit, because you're really not saying the right things to yourself right now to even get through this. But borrow my words, borrow my hope, borrow my strength a little bit. And then eventually I'm going to start letting it go a little bit. I'm here with you, but you're going to see that you're going to get stronger and stronger. It's going to take some time eventually, but you're going to eventually find out you can go weeks and really deal with this healthily. But you're going to have a bad day.
Yeah.
And then you come back and you go a little further. But it's growing hope because what's the opposite? It's growing despair.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's showing up.
there's two tie-ins there. One, what I like about what you just said with the example with your friend is when you remove the special from struggle, right? Because you even said, well, can't you tell I'm going through a hard time? It's like, life is hard times and then you die, right?
Yeah.
So it's like,
You're not unique.
yeah. Let's not
My
allow-
poor children would tell you I told them to them a lot. I was like,
Right?
that's not fair. Well, life's not fair, and then you die. They're like, wow, that was a lot, Mom. Yeah.
But
yeah,
it's true, and it's what you do with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's the whole thing we're talking about. What choice are you going to make with the fact that life's unfair and that there's no guarantee that it's not going to get worse every step of the way until you die, right? That's the question here. And it's like, well, I'm not going to make it special, and I don't want to feel like I'm in a special circumstance because it's not fair. But I need someone maybe to remind me that it's not special. It's like, no, man, life just sucks. Oh, thank goodness, I'm not unique. Let's just get through it then.
yes,
You know?
exactly.
And the linguistics, I'd say the spirit or the central feeling of what you guys talk about with hope versus despair is what I've really been honing in, and also Aaron and I've really been honing in on with unity versus divisiveness, right? It like hope unifies, right? Having hope, building resilience has brought your guys' marriage together stronger. It's bringing these relationships stronger together.
Pete's posse was born
Yeah.
out of hope.
Out of hope.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like hope unifies. It's not divisive.
Yeah.
Right? It's not tearing you guys apart. If all you focused on was that you need a break and she's abandoning you, and that's what the focus became, and that, you know, all these second and third order effects, and you despair, now you're being separated also. You're isolating, and now you're really going to get yourself in trouble, right? Because it's the adverse. And it's interesting because, like you said, if you focus on building resilience, there's hope in that. If you focus on what we have unity in, there's hope in that, there's strength in that, and it's a lot more powerful than focusing on the maybe more sexy or loud things that we're not in agreement on, but and can destroy things but aren't necessary.
The grumble sessions, like you say, oh, this
Yeah.
feels good, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. It's like, you got to get up and do something at some
Yes.
point, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
There's just a union there, right?
Yeah.
Pursue unity, pursue hope,
Yeah.
and pursue strength.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
What an incredible story that you guys are walking out. This isn't like happy ending. We're not going to wrap this all up. And then this is what happened. And now you guys can all rest that the Heinigers are just fine. And they marched off in the sun. Like, you're very much in this right now. And you're still smiling. You're still laughing. You're thinking about, I mean, that to me is an incredible thing.
It is, and it's a credible thing from, I think, where we started. I think because in those opening moments of any journey or chaotic experience that comes into your life, when you have to accept that reality, like, okay, like, I don't know how long this is going to last, but you end up with that darkness, you know, that kind of just clouds over, and this is going to be something that's kind of cloudy for the foreseeable future. So to feel like you've worked through that and get to another side and feel like not only do I have a brighter outlook and I have hope, but now I'm also able to give it to so many more people, and I'm able to, and it's not platitudes. It's like, I can tell you, you know, from experience. And I think even though my journey is going to be different, even my cancer journey is different than somebody else's cancer journey, and we all kind of respond to chemo and everything a little bit differently. It's something that you can, you know, you kind of have that mark. I mean, like, if you served in the military, there's just something that you understand about the military that I don't, right? Because, and, you know, and I think it's the same thing. If you've walked through some level of cancer, you do that. If you've walked through some trauma, you've walked through those things, or grief, you're now more apt to be able to help somebody through that. And I think if that can be your focus, like, don't just do it for yourself. Like, you know, like, you need to care for yourself and do great self-care. But at the same time, like, if you can give yourself a purpose of, if I get through this, then I can unlock some keys for somebody else that's on the same thing, then how much more purposeful that, you know, is my life, right? And I think all of a sudden you can give yourself joy and peace in the midst of, you know, like you said, our journey's still going, but I get joy and peace from helping someone else, even though I've still got more of my journey to continue. And so that's like a big deal.